There are two things that people are massively overlooking when it comes to Cardano and the other Gen 3 blockchains. Who actually owns these blockchains and how much you actually own your own coins when you're staking. Ready? Let's go. A lot of people have been asking me to go through and do specific videos about specific Gen 3 blockchain competitors of Cardano that aren't Ethereum. And I could do that. But it would just turn out to be these gigantic festivals of technical shortcomings that Cardano has already solved and had peer reviewed. Sure, all of these competitors, not all of them, but a lot of these competitors have really good things going for them. But with each of them, I mean, we could go through and compare what they've done in terms of technical innovation to Cardano. And it's just going to be a lot of negative complaints about a lot of these projects. Not all of them, but a lot of them. Instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about the big fundamental issues that I think a lot of these projects have gotten wrong that Cardano has already solved. Gen 3 blockchains involve smart contracts and proof of stake. One of the most important things we have to realize about this is that in proof of stake, it really matters who owns the coins because that determines who gets to do the block validation. And while pretty much all of the Gen 3 competitors are sort of claiming to be the heirs of Satoshi's vision of decentralization and pushing power down to the people, a lot of these projects are just donning the mantle of decentralization. They're just wearing the clothes of decentralization, and they are in fact not very decentralized. Let's start with the good ones. We see here, so Messari put this out, I think back in May. In May of this year, Messari put out this chart, and it didn't get, I don't think it really got that much traction. A lot of people have seen it, but a lot of people have not seen it, and it definitely did not get that much traction because a lot of ecosystems probably did not want this to get very much traction. Cardano is not one of them. This reflects very, very well on the projects which truly are decentralized. You can see here, so the way this chart works, the pinkish colored section of the pie chart is how much money the insiders got, how much money the teams, the founders, how much they got, how much coins, sorry, they got. The grayish part is how much the foundation got. Then you got this yellowish part, which is how much would go to community allocations. The chart identifies that as ecosystems funds or airdrops that will eventually go to the community. More on that later. The blue section is how much was actually allowed to be acquired by the public. So you can see with projects like Cardano, you have 19% between the insiders, the team, like in this case, probably IOHK, Emergo, and the foundation. In the case of Cardano, between those three entities, you've got 19% of the coins. The rest of the coins, the vast majority, went to the public. So you've got the insiders and the foundation, which is a nonprofit, holding 19%. This is pretty close to Ethereum. You notice in Ethereum's case, it's 20%. The rest went to the public. In the case of a project like Tezos, it's 20%. The rest went to the public. You've got a blockchain like EOS over here. The insiders only kept 10% according to this chart, and the rest was sold to public. But that's because they had the world's most gigantic ICO ever that eventually got them in trouble with the regulators, where they sold off $4 billion worth of coins. So they had a strong economic incentive to sell off that much. Cardano, project like Cardano, they weren't trying to rake in $4 billion because they knew that would get them in trouble with the regulators. So they didn't do this gigantic thing where they sold off as many coins as possible. And EOS also had problems we won't get into today with centralization, where basically like 21 guys could jump on a conference call and reverse the blockchain. That actually happened on like day one of staking, if I recall. Day one of block validation, if I recall. But anyways, that's another video. But so you notice a few of these projects, and these all were early. These were all early to the Gen 3 scene. I mean, Ethereum still doesn't have proof of stake for its main chain, but you know, Cardano and Tezos really early on the Gen 3 scene. And they kind of mirrored what Ethereum had done. Very low allocation to the foundation and to the insiders. Then we get down to some other projects. Like we notice we have these projects like Internet Computer, ICP, who famously debuted in the top 10 because there was so much VC hype around them. ICP has this allocation of 39 and 34% to the insiders and to the foundation. That's 74%. A colossal 74% went to the foundation and the insiders, with this tiny section. What is that? Little bit, maybe 25%. There's a little tiny bit that was allocated to community allocations, but around 25% to the public. Then you've got another level of this. You've got Avalanche and Solana. Both Avalanche and Solana retained about 61% for the insiders and for the foundation. You can see in the case of Avalanche, it's only 42% to the insiders. Solana wasn't satisfied even with that. They were like, Avalanche, you only took 42%. ICP, you only took 39%. We're going to try to get up around those Binance numbers. Binance over here kept 50%. And Solana's like, we can get up there. We can get there. We'll take 48% and retain that for the insiders. Here, this chart is identifying the insiders as the team, the company, the VC purchase tokens, but largely insiders. So Solana, you've got almost half of the coins being owned by insiders and another 13% being owned by the foundation. Then you've got this little tiny sliver. They didn't even list a percentage for it, but this little tiny sliver that was allocated to the public, according to Messari. Then you've got this gigantic chunk. You'll notice this gigantic chunk right here that's called community allocations, ecosystem funds, or airdrops that will eventually go to the community. You'll notice this is also much larger than Avalanche or ICP or Cardano or Ethereum or Tezos. The only place you see allocations that big really are down here in these coins that are much, 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 much lower market cap. So what is this? What is this little grayish yellow area? Well, if you think about it, community allocations, ecosystem funds, or airdrops. I don't know exactly what they are in the case of Solana, but when I think about airdrops and things like that, it says ecosystem funds or airdrops will eventually go to the community. This 48% and 13%, why? I think you got to ask the question, are they going to be included as part of the community? I have this sneaking feeling, this fear that this doesn't all go right here, that it probably goes out in here too. So these chunks, if this gets absorbed by the community, in air quotes, I wonder how much of it actually ends up in the hands of this 48% and this 13%. So the insider control, I don't think it may not be mitigated by the size of this piece, because you have to ask the question, where is this piece going to go? This piece right here is already so gigantic, especially this 48%. This is not decentralization, guys. This is decentralization. This is decentralization. This is decentralization. Even this was decentralization of ownership of the coins. And we'll just go ahead and say that's synonymous with ownership of the blockchain, even though you could argue no one really owns the blockchain. But let's just say it's ownership of the blockchain. These are all decentralized, even though this one, block validation, turned out to be very, very centralized. With the rest of these, we've got true decentralization. Ownership of the blockchain, ownership of the coins was decentralized right from go. We see the exact opposite of that with some of the other Gen 3 competitors. Why would they do this? Why would they do this? They're mirroring what companies would do in the legacy system. If you're a tech startup in the legacy world and you're just selling equities, stocks, this is what you try to do. You try to keep as much ownership of the company as possible. You try to control as much of the equity of the project as you possibly can and give up as little as possible to outside investors. That makes the value of your ownership of the company very high. There's an alternate way to look at this, though. The way that the the crypto world normally looks at this. The crypto world says, hey, there is a tremendous amount of value in decentralization. So even though we're the ones founding this project, building it, we're only going to take 17%, 19% counting the foundation, 20% counting the foundation, 20% counting the foundation. We're going to take a much smaller percentage because we know there's value in having this gigantic blue slice. Over here, if you built this company, and we're just taking Messari at their word here, maybe Solana would say these percentages aren't quite correct. But man, if you built this company where the pie chart looks like this, can you really say you value decentralization? It's a very different blockchain when the ownership looks like this. A related question is, how is governance ever going to work when it looks like this? I mean, we know how it's going to work, but it's not going to be decentralized. When the insiders own almost half of the entire project, and there's a question mark, we don't know how much of this piece they're going to absorb, and this is the only public piece, how can you ever have decentralized governance? Can you, when you have this gigantic number of votes sitting over here? Just to give Solana the benefit of the doubt, I went to the most recent information I could find from them on Solana.com. I found this December 2020 transparency report. So this is as of December 2020. And luckily, it shows an unlock schedule for all the locked coins held by employees and service providers, SAFT investors, founders. It goes on to talk about validators. But when I just added up, and I think my math is correct, but you can double check me. When I just added up the founder coins, it looks like we've got sort of like two tranches of 31,250,000 that are going to be unlocked to the founders. The SAFT investors looks like they have 176,949,616, and the employees and service providers looks like they have 74,591,571. When I add those all up, and remember, it looks like there's two tranches of this amount. Half of the founders tokens will be unlocked. This amount of founder tokens currently expected to be unlocked on January 7th is this amount. The remaining half will unlock monthly over the following 24 months. So when I add up 2 times this, plus this, plus this, it looks like we get 314,041,187 coins. That is incredibly problematic when you look at the amount of circulating coins on either CoinMarketCap or CoinGecko. You're going to see very similar numbers. That 314 million coins locked up among those parties we just talked about, locked up and unlocked actually now, it exceeds the circulating supply of 286 million coins. They've got 314 million coins being held by those groups we just talked about. There are only 286 million circulating right now. There's more coins in those groups than there are actually circulating. The total supply, so once they get done issuing all that yellow section of the pie chart through their airdrops or community allotments, whatever they end up being, is going to be 502 million. But that 314 million, if you divide that by 502 million, you get about 62%. Pretty much exactly what Messari was indicating in that pie chart. So it looks like Messari was pretty accurate, at least as to Solana. All this lack of decentralization of ownership of Solana coins is probably pretty dismaying to Solana advocates. The idea that there are things about the project that they aren't exactly dying to advertise the rest of the world shouldn't be shocking to anybody who was around last year. Here's a Medium article from a founder of Solana when this happened. I'll read you the exact language. So Solana contracted a market maker to provide liquidity in the aftermarket and ensure that buy and sell orders always get met. So Solana Foundation contracted a market maker. That's the exact language he uses. As part of this agreement, the Solana Foundation agreed to lend the market maker 11 million tokens for a 6-month period, over 11 million tokens. The problem, we did not disclose this information to the public, as well as the size and nature of the loan during the CoinList auction and subsequent Binance listing. So you notice he says some members of our community did great work building tools to view token balances and found an account totaling 13 million tokens. He says, we apologize deeply for any confusion this may have caused. It pains us greatly to see the Discord distraction, typical apology stuff. To make things right, we're taking 2 steps towards ensuring full transparency into past and future token releases. We're setting the record straight, and down here below, we're removing the tokens. It looks like they're saying they were going to burn the tokens. So I mean, I'm sure people inside Solana know a lot more about this than I do, but it looks like the community figured out there was this mystery wallet of 13 million tokens, and they had to come clean and say, oh yeah, we did not disclose this to you. I have to ask, I have to ask the question, would they have ever disclosed it if somebody hadn't noticed it? I don't think this would be a red flag to me. If I was a Solana investor at this time, this would have been a red flag. Like, hey, either they meant to not disclose this, or they don't know enough about crypto communities to know that this would be highly relevant to the community. Obviously, I haven't double checked all of these numbers in this Masari infographic, but after my superficial look into Solana coin ownership, it looks to be the case that not all of Cardano's competitors really are exercising decentralization in the same way that Cardano and Ethereum and Tezos are. In fact, the exact opposite seems to be true. But there's another factor we need to look at here, another thing that I think also makes a really big difference, and that's how much you actually own your own coins when you're staking on these blockchains. There's a really big distinction in the world of proof of stake, and it has to do with how much you own your coins when you're staking. Ownership is really a bundle of rights. Maybe the most important right in that bundle is to what extent people can take those coins away from you, right? There's other rights within that bundle, things you can do with your coins, but probably the most important one is how much people can take those coins away from you against your will. The big distinction in proof of stake, to me, is whether or not a proof of stake system has slashing. What is slashing? Slashing in proof of stake systems is a mechanism. You have to have a mechanism to ensure that people don't maliciously validate blocks. That means they don't validate blocks with incorrect data, right? Like the classic scenario would be saying, hey, this guy over here sent his millions of dollars of coins to me when actually the guy didn't, and you could steal the person's coins. Many large spectrum of malicious behavior on a blockchain, but that's like one classic example you could think of is saying a transfer happened that didn't actually happen. So the intellectually easy way to solve this is through slashing. That's when you say, hey, if you maliciously validate a block or you do something else that's against our rules on this blockchain, we're going to take part of your stake and we're either going to burn it or we're going to distribute it to everybody else. This is easy. It's really obvious. Like, it's a stake. They're putting it at stake. So the punishment for bad behavior is that it gets taken away from them. Cardano went a completely different direction. Cardano went and interacted with the world of game theory and figured out this great innovation, Ouroboros, that through game theory ensures that people don't engage in malicious behavior, but which doesn't include coin slashing. In Cardano, when you're staking, there's no rules in the system that result in you losing your staked coins if the stake pool screws up. The stake pool is basically the block validator in this case. In a lot of the other proof of stake systems, if the validator you've staked your coins to screws up, you do lose your coins. And when I open up the Solana documentation, I see exactly this. We can see staking rewards. The purpose is threefold. Align validator incentives with that of the greater cluster through skin in the game deposits at risk. This is the phrase I like to use, skin in the game. And we see below, much of this thinking is based on the current status of Casper FFG. This documentation is all at docs.solana.com. I'm sure somebody within the Solana community could come up with a more updated version of what Solana is actually up to. But this is what they have on their website, docs.solana.com. They have this slashing roadmap, which kind of gives you the impression that they don't exactly even know how they're going to do their slashing. They say slashing is a hard problem. It becomes harder when the goal of the network is to have the lowest possible latency. Fundamentally, our goal for slashing is to slash 100% in cases where the node is maliciously trying to violate safety rules and 0% during routine operations. How we aim to achieve that is to first implement slashing proofs without any automatic slashing whatsoever. Right now, for regular consensus, after a safety violation, the network will halt. The network will halt as part of what they were doing for slashing when they wrote this. We can analyze the data and figure out who was responsible and propose that the stake should be slashed after restart. Once the violation has been observed, the validators will freeze the effective stake in the next epoch and will decide on the next upgrade if the violation requires slashing. This is all pretty loosely defined. It looks like they don't even know exactly how they're going to implement slashing. I'm sure they have some other documents where they've laid out a better plan, but this is in their documents at docs.solana.com. You'll remember that they said they attributed part of this thinking to Casper FFG. What is that? Ethereum Casper is the proof of stake protocol that Ethereum has chosen to go with, or we can say that Casper is the implementation that will eventually convert Ethereum into a proof of stake blockchain. This is from blockchaincouncil.org. It's not just a specific project. There are two co-developed Casper implementations in the Ethereum ecosystem. These two projects are Friendly Finality Gadget FFG and Correct by Construction. Casper is a proof of stake model that may also be adopted and implemented in other blockchain networks. Much of this thinking is based on Casper. They're saying the Ethereum system. They're just taking the Ethereum system and they're adding it to their blockchain. This is not the hallmark of technological innovation. And it's especially not probably what's the most important innovation in proof of stake. And that's that you don't lose your coins if the validator screws up. That's the piece that Cardano's done. To me, this is the most important stick in the bundle of rights, that no one can take my coins away from me against my will. But in fact, in all of these Gen 3 proof of stake platforms, where whenever you're staking, if they have slashing, you can't guarantee that ownership right to yourself. You might actually lose your coins. This is a fundamental distinction. In Cardano, this doesn't happen. There's not a circumstance in staking where the validator screws up and you lose your coins. In some of these other Ethereum-based systems, that's the only way that they are. It's substantially the only way that they ensure good behavior on the part of the validators. Whether rightly or wrongly, we often talk about big money coming into the crypto ecosystem one day. Like every company, every big, gigantic Fortune 500 company being involved in crypto in some ways. And of course, if you're a fan of Gen 3 blockchains, you think about them being involved in Gen 3 blockchains, and staking is going to be pretty attractive to them. Does anybody think they're going to choose the staking systems with slashing where they could actually lose their coins? When they talk about it in board meetings and they're presented with the option of a staking system where there's no possible way for you to lose your coins because the validator made a mistake, or the staking system where you lose your coins if the validator makes a mistake, how much do you think these boards of these large corporations are going to be good with the lose your coins scenario? These are pretty black and white issues. Either the ownership of your coin is decentralized or it's not. Either you have coin slashing or you don't. If you don't, and your system, if you have a system like Ouroboros that actually works without coin slashing, a lot of potential participants in your ecosystem are going to find that to be pretty black and white, also pretty binary. If there's no chance of losing my coins, it's going to be highly preferable to be a part of that ecosystem as opposed to the one where staking involves this risk of losing my coins. I think Cardano has done it correctly on both counts, while a lot of its competitors have done it incorrectly because it was easier or it was more lucrative. Talk to you tomorrow.